Hey, welcome to Mind Your Mind with Just Justified. So, this is a space where we are going to research, we're going to dissect, we're going to discuss, we're going to focus on various topics that aid in deeper thought and clarification, insight, and we also want to encourage accountability and just a whole thoughtful society. So, you saw that thumbnail. Today, we are talking about the elephant in the room. Now, usually, when we talk about the elephant in the room, we're talking about something that is not said, but maybe should be said. So, we are going to tackle how we can go about facing those difficult conversations. I found some really great clips that we can kind of dive into. And, let's get started. We got some great ones. First clip.
Have you noticed that avoiding a difficult conversation just creates this difficult feeling inside of you? And so we sit here and tell ourselves a lie that avoiding it will make it better, when the truth is it's the avoidance of these hard or difficult conversations that create discomfort inside of all of us. And a lot of times what I've found when I've had these conversations is the other person didn't even know I was upset. And it wasn't until I found the courage to have the conversation that I relieved myself of the discomfort and I empowered the situation to get better. I don't think this conversation will necessarily change the other person, but finding the courage to have this difficult conversation will change you.
And that is a key that we have to think about. Sometimes we do not want to have that difficult conversation, and it needs to be said. And we're worrying so much about that other person, where to that other person, it may not even be on their mind the way it is for us, but then it's eating up at us. So one thing she mentioned was courage, having the courage to have the conversation if it's needed, because it does not make things better when we avoid the conversation, but it actually makes more discomfort, so that's one way of looking at tackling the difficult conversations, having courage. Then there's this really a cool flip that they said on tonight's conversation that I want to actually show you.
Say, all right, I can understand that you're not at the capacity to have this argument or this conversation with me, but when are you? Because when we go back and we circle back to shutting down, right, it's I'll have this conversation later or until I'm not mad anymore or if I'm not upset anymore, and then I'll just kind of like sweep it under the rug. And sometimes the frustration comes in when you're tired of people just sweeping things under the rug or your partner sweeping things under the rug and not like communicating. And this is why you yearn for that emotional intelligence. Let's talk about it. Let's fix this problem.
I like the fact that you spoke on shutting down. You'll hear a lot of people say I'm emotionally intelligent and one of their coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms is to shut down. Well, then you lack emotional intelligence if that's the case, because shutting down is part of your fight or flight. So that means that you don't have the ability in that moment to regulate whatever emotion it is that you're experiencing and to be able to be vocal about what you're experiencing. So that's not a part of emotional intelligence whatsoever.
Right. So that one right there was really cool. They had a lot of nuggets in there because a lot of times when it comes to difficult conversations, we tend to want to leave it for later, Then it ends up being swept under the rug. And then usually when it's swept under the rug, we never kind of get back to it. And then the situation just kind of lingers. So that was one good point that they talked about, not to try and leave it for later, try and tackle it as soon as possible. Then some people, as she said, their defense mechanism or their coping is to shut down. And that means I like when she talked about emotional intelligence, because a lot of times when we do not want to tackle anything, we're worried more so of how that person will feel or how I'll feel, rather than letting us feel what we need to feel. But whatever the situation is, it is being handled. So I think that is a great way of looking at it, because, you know, she talked about fight or flight. That is a way of, that's when we're avoiding. That's not actually being emotional intelligent and facing. So that is just like a reaction rather than actually dealing with the situation. So I thought that was a really good clip as well. Then we have this awesome clip
that said, when we avoid having difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. And I think that's 100% true. However, if I've had that difficult conversation with you and you keep choosing to make things uncomfortable, I'm going to choose distance over disrespect.
See, I think that one was dope. Talking about if you avoid difficult conversations, you're trading the short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. So basically, you're worrying more about the comfort level rather than the solution. So you're leaving it for later, as we talked about before, and then it may fester, and then there will be there'll be more dysfunction. So I really liked how she put that. Then she also went on to talk about that, okay, once we've had that conversation and you keep on choosing the discomfort rather than coming to a common ground, agree to disagree, whatever the situation is, then once you continue with the discomfort, then she'll rather distance over the disrespect, which I think that's really a cool way of looking at it. I'm one to have those boundaries nowadays, and I feel like that's something that we don't talk about enforcing boundaries, caring for ourselves when we're disrespected. You know, we have a lot of generations, especially if you're from the Caribbean or you know, wherever, because I'm sure it's not only the Caribbean, but a lot of times where there's this like continuation of dysfunction or not acknowledging people's boundaries, and just kind of, you know, not just you know, passing boundaries basically. So when we look at that, we have to really focus on keeping that distance. We don't have to tolerate it. And I think that's what a lot of previous generations have done. They've tolerated it, and it was like something that you kind of had to take. Where no, we can enforce our boundaries. We can have distance if it's needed. So I thought that was a good one too. Now this guy does a really cool analogy about a car. Let's check this out.
Let me tell you something. Follow this scenario. Say I have a car, right? And every day the battery dies. Friends and people close to me are like, yo, you really need to change your battery. I say, you know, I'll get to it. Not now. I'll get to it later. Eventually, I get so frustrated about my battery continuing to die that one day I take a hammer and I smash the car to pieces. I just completely destroy the car. A lot of y'all right now are like, yo, that makes no sense. Why would you destroy a car over something as simple as you changing the battery? But I need to suggest to you that there are a lot of you who are treating your relationships just like this, where something as simple as a conversation could repair it, but because you're putting it off because you don't want to have the difficult conversation, you get so frustrated, you get so bitter, you get so angry that when it's time to have a conversation to repair, instead you have a conversation to release. It's not about fixing the issue. It's about releasing all of that pent-up anger, frustration, resentment, bitterness. And now in a situation where the relationship could have been repaired, you've released, and now it's been destroyed. Listen to me. This is a word for all of you who struggle having difficult conversations, and I've been guilty of this myself. There is no success in love if there is no success in difficult and awkward conversations. They are necessary to a relationship just like a battery is necessary to a car. What are you not saying? Look, let me tell you something.
That was a word. That right there was a word. So basically, in this analogy, he's talking about a car being destroyed instead of just changing the battery when the battery goes out. You destroying the car instead of just doing what is needed, which is just changing a battery, which is a lesser situation, but you decide to take like a major situation, a major attempt at dealing with the situation, when you can just actually just change the battery. So sometimes we're not having the necessary conversations in a relationship, and then that's festering, like it's festering whatever emotions, and it's boiling up. And then what can be a simple solution as overcoming with that courage and having a conversation, no, we are letting it fester. And then instead of a release, and instead of a conversation to a release, there's a conversation to repair later on. So I thought that was a really nice analogy. And last, here is from an actual therapist, I believe, talking about having difficult conversations.
Best hacks when you need to have a difficult conversation with someone that you care about. So once you've found a good time and place for the conversation, you're going to begin by stating your intention or framing the conversation. For example, you could say something like, look, I know this won't be an easy conversation, but I wanted to have it because I value our relationship too much to allow resentments to build. And in having this conversation with you, I'm hoping that you can better understand me, but at the same time, I want an opportunity to better understand you. I want us to walk away from this with a stronger relationship. By doing this, you're creating an intention, or you're framing how you want the conversation to go. And from there, you're going to stick to that frame and use it as kind of a guideline. So you'll want to be direct, but also keep the conversation respectful. Put the relationship first throughout the entire discussion. And if either one of you deviates, remind them of your intention. If emotions make it difficult or impossible to stay within that frame, then table the conversation for now. And if and when it's appropriate, come back to it when you're both in a better space. State the intention and try it again.
So I thought that was helpful, and if you notice, a lot of the times they're not disqualifying that it's going to be difficult sometimes when it comes to the emotions we feel about having the conversation, but it is necessary. So even though there are tactics, where he said, basically stating your intentions, like what you also call framing, stating your intentions for where you want this conversation to go. And that is very important, because then you want to also state that how important that relationship is to you. So you want to kind of keep that on the table, because sometimes people can get defensive as well. So when you state how important the relationship is, and that you want a resolve through this conversation, or an understanding, or whatever it is, keeping the importance of the relationship in the forefront is a great idea. Yep. So I thought this was definitely a great a great clip for some advice on how to approach difficult conversations. And just to end this off, I want to talk about the 3 C's of difficult conversations. First, which we've touched in some of these clips, was courage. We've touched it. Courage. It's going to be difficult. Sometimes you have to just breathe and do what you got to do, because it's going to be difficult. That's what it is. That's why we say elephant in the room. Difficult conversation. It's going to be difficult. So you have to have that courage to kind of look at that outcome where you want that outcome to be. Clarity. That's the second C. Clarity. We want to be clear on what our intentions are, as we also heard from him just a while ago. We want to be clear about what our intentions are with this conversation. What do we want our outcome to be? I don't want to hurt you with this conversation. I just want to kind of gain a better understanding. Let's see if we can agree, or even if we kind of agree to disagree, because we may not see it the same way, but the conversation needs to be had so we can at least know where each viewpoint is coming from. Next, control. Control your emotions. Don't go overboard. Try to be calm, cool, collected. Some more C's. But those are some helpful things for facing those difficult conversations. Listen, sometimes it may not be easy, but it's important. There are some things that needs to be said, especially when we're talking about even breaking some generational cycles that kind of bring us down. We have to focus on healing, and we can't focus on healing without facing those difficult conversations. So thank you for having this conversation with me. And please keep the conversation going in the comment section. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, don't forget to comment again. But please, I would love to hear from you. All right, till next time.